Joining us now, she ran for president in 2016. She ran for U.S. Senate in California prior to that, and she was also the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, now a Virginia resident and potential candidate for Senate from Virginia in 2018. And I should say that is potential. Joining us now, Carly Fiorina. Great to have you with us, Carly.
Well, good morning, John. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, well, let me start by apologizing to you, Carly, on the air. I was so mean to you during this campaign, and I said some of the meanest, most nastiest things imaginable in the political campaign directed at you over a very long period of time. And so I am very sorry for that.
Well, thank you, John. That means a lot to me. It's a big person who can apologize, so I accept your apology with gratitude for you having offered it. And look, I'm a big girl. We big girls put our pants on too, and so lots of mean things have been said about me over the course of my life. I'm used to being controversial for reasons I don't fully understand. In California, I was controversial because I was a conservative. Mm-hmm. But as a longtime Virginia resident, I met and married my husband here 35 years ago. We raised our kids here. They went to public school, public university. Our grandkids are doing the same. We really think of ourselves as Virginians, and I must say it's wonderful to be back. We've lived here now almost 6 years since we returned from California. So happy to be back and happy to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I was really mean, and I'm sorry about that. And the last time we saw each other, I actually got my picture taken with yourself and your husband, Frank. It was at a campaign rally on a Sunday in Manchester, New Hampshire. I don't know if you remember that, but it was at some place, and it was downtown Manchester. And you had about 300 people there. It was a big crowd, and that was in Manchester, New Hampshire. So, but
well, I do remember, and running for president was a great privilege. It was a great experience. I've seen so much of the country in all kinds of roles over the last couple decades, but being knee-deep in the political process is really a wonderful privilege.
Well, look, I followed your campaign, obviously, and we had our differences over your differences with Trump. But that was in the past. Now we move ahead. We turn the page. And again, I thank you for accepting my apology, because that was really mean to you. All right, let's get on to what is going on. The Justice Department of the Trump administration is going to be presenting their arguments to continue on with Trump's 7-country ban. Carly Fiorina, what do you make of this whole thing?
Well, first, my dad was a conservative judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And it's tough being a conservative on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I know that court. It's a left-leaning court. There is no doubt. The judges who are going to be hearing this case this afternoon, one was appointed by Jimmy Carter, one by Barack Obama, one by George W. Bush. We will see how they rule, but I would not be surprised if they rule against Trump's Justice Department. And then I think, most likely, if that's the case, this may go all the way to the Supreme Court. That's what our separation of powers is about. Look, I absolutely agree and did on the campaign trail with President Trump that our immigration system is broken, that it puts America at risk, that we are not thoughtful and careful about who we let into this country and how they are vetted. On the other hand, I will say that I think how decisions are made and how decisions are rolled out and communicated matters. And so in this case, honestly, I would have preferred, it's water under the bridge, but I would have preferred had President Trump waited until he had an Attorney General, a Secretary of State, and a Secretary of Homeland Security confirmed. And then if he had asked those 3 secretaries to present to him within 30 days a plan for extreme vetting, I think potentially there are many more countries whose vetting policies should be reviewed, not just these 7. Having said that, we are where we are. And so now I hope that if President Trump prevails this afternoon, he will ask his cabinet officials to take a broader look and potentially a more thoughtful look at what we should do on a more holistic basis. And if he does not prevail, I hope the same thing, honestly. Obviously, that will be the law of the land, and the ban will go back into place. But I think a more thorough and thoughtful decision-making process would have allowed the American people, more of the American people, to be supportive of what is obviously necessary. A relook, a redo, a restart of our immigration and vetting and refugee system.
So if I understand what you're saying, Carly Fiorina, it sounds like you don't think the timing and the way it was rolled out was particularly effective, but are you saying that done the right way, you agree with the policy overall?
Done the right way, there is no doubt that we need to redo our vetting, our immigration system in general, and our refugee policies. There's no doubt about that. And potentially, by the way, I think we ought to be reviewing our vetting systems, our visa programs. We have 16 of them. No wonder they're not effective. We ought to be looking at that potentially even more broadly than the 7 countries. Recall, for example, that the terrorist attack that happened in California, the wife who helped plan that attack came from Pakistan. And we missed her in the visa process, although looking back on her, there was evidence that she had been radicalized. So we clearly need a broad relook at who comes into this country and how they are vetted. There is no doubt about that, and I support that. I think how we do this matters, and so I hope the president will take the time now to do it thoroughly and effectively.
The other incident, Carly, was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, when we got 2 terrorists managed to make their way in as Iraqi refugees. They got through the vetting process. They were subsequently arrested by the FBI because they were planning on how to murder and maim more U.S. troops by procuring weapons in the U.S. and things of that nature. And that just, nobody's ever dealt with that either. So, look, I think we're in agreement
here.
You're
absolutely right.
Right? I mean, nobody's ever dealt with that as if it didn't happen.
That's right. And that's why we need a new system. I mean, President Trump is absolutely right. Our vetting processes are insufficient. Our immigration system is broken. We are not thoughtful about how our immigration policies serve this nation. There's no question about that. It needs to be done. It needs to be done so that it will be sustainable and effective, and it also needs to be done so that the majority of Americans will continue to support it. I mean, let's face it. It is not helpful when you have an Iraqi interpreter get off an airplane, and say, oh, my gosh, I've spent the last 10 years helping America. That's not helpful.
Well, and as you know, of course, what the liberals do, and you fought them in California, you fought them on the campaign trail for president a long time, is they'll take the cases, they'll take individual cases, they'll put them on TV. Like I was on CNN the other night, and they put up a 4-month-old baby and said this policy put this baby at risk. I mean, obviously, how do you possibly answer that? You don't want the baby to be put at risk, but that's kind of the arguments that they have.
Well, exactly right, John. And that's why, by the way, to your point, that's why how a decision gets made, how it's implemented, how it's communicated matters. Because when people are surprised by something, it gives the liberals more of an opportunity to make an issue of it. But no question. We know how the liberals play. Look, let's be honest. The liberals aren't going to change their tactics. They're not going to change their tactics. And they have no interest in giving this president even 1 second of a chance. My goodness, we're 2 weeks into an administration, and already the Democrats are in a absurd fashion blocking every single nominee. They seem to have forgotten that elections have consequences. His cabinet appointments are incredibly qualified. What they're doing to Betsy DeVos is shameful, not to mention his other nominees as well. Their tactics aren't going to change. So we just need to be really smart about how we defeat them, just as he was very smart about how he defeated Hillary Clinton in the election.
Carly, let's get to Betsy DeVos. Do you believe she's qualified for Secretary of Education? Why?
Of course. Betsy DeVos, I have known Betsy DeVos for many years. She is a committed reformer to the education system, which is what we desperately need, real reform. And it is, of course, why, because she's committed, because she's effective, because she's had an impact, it is why the array of opponents against her is so hysterical at this point, because they know she's going to be effective. So the teachers' unions have put it all on the line, and the Democrats literally, the senators who are Democrats and opposing her have forgotten what their duty is. Their duty is to determine whether someone is qualified. Their duty is not to rail against the outcome of an election. Elections have consequences. She is a qualified choice to be Secretary of Education. She will be confirmed, but it is too bad that she has to go through, and others do as well now, that she has to go through this kind of gauntlet.
No question. And Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have said that they're now going to have blanket opposition to every remaining nominee, extend everything out to the maximum amount of 30 hours in order to be obstructionist. I think this whole thing is going to backfire. Let's get to the Senate. If you were in the U.S. Senate, you might be at some time. This 60-vote cloture rule, which is a man-made option. This is a man-made Senate rule. It's not in the Constitution. I don't think that Judge Gorsuch is going to get 60 votes. So would you be in favor in that instance of invoking the nuclear option, is question A. Question B is, what do you think of our nominee?
Well, first of all, the nominee is superb. I mean, what a fantastic choice. And President Trump has kept his promises in terms of the kinds of people he put in the cabinet and the man that he has now nominated to the Supreme Court. He's kept all of his promises, actually. But this is just a superb choice. And if I were in the Senate, I would say that it is imperative that we get this man confirmed. I would think if I were a Democrat, thankfully I'm not, but if I were a Democrat, I might think a little bit longer term. Because honestly, if the Democrats force us to go to the nuclear option, then the next time there's a nominee up, we'll have an easy time as well. And that will really be the seat that changes the complexion of the court for generations to come. So, I think the Democrats right now, Chuck Schumer, they are in the thralls of the progressive wing of their party. I think that is self-destructive to them. It'll be interesting how Senator Tim Kaine feels about this, because Senator Tim Kaine, who before he became Hillary Clinton's nominee for vice president, sang a very different tune in Virginia. Senator Tim Kaine, I think, will be demonstrating that he has moved whole hog to the left of his party if he decides to vote against Judge Gorsuch, who is no doubt eminently qualified, eminently reasonable, and yes, a conservative, which is not disqualifying, I will remind our Democratic friends.
Well, I mean, Trump won the election. He's not going to nominate.
That's right.
He's not going to nominate an activist. So a judicial activist. He's not going to nominate a liberal. So I mean, he did win, and so I don't know. I mean,
elections have consequences.
Exactly. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but let me paraphrase. It sounds like what I've heard you say is that if Judge Gorsuch can't get to 60, you would be in favor of then having Majority Leader McConnell invoke the nuclear option, right?
Yes, I think we need the judge confirmed. I think Mitch McConnell does not want to invoke the nuclear option because he has great respect for the institution of the Senate. And that option has consequences. On the other hand, if the Democrats force his hand, I believe he will and he should do what is necessary to get this man confirmed.
Okay, let's talk about Virginia politics. I believe that you're going to run for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Virginia in 2018 for the privilege of running against Tim Kaine. That's just my narrative.
I'm glad, John, you're so sure what I'm going to do.
I know. Isn't that right? I believe that. So I think you're going to run.
Okay, there you go.
And I think you ought to. But here's the other question. In order to be the nominee in Virginia, actually, you've got to go ahead locally and engage Republicans, all right? You just can't do 2 rallies and leave the state. What I've been impressed with what you've done, and I want you to share some of this with our audience, is every event that I've been at, you've either been there or some of your staff has been there, but you've personally been at event after event trying to inspire Republicans in the state. Can you tell us a little bit about the activity that you've had with Republicans in Virginia?
Well, so as I said at the outset, John, I'm a Virginian. In fact, my Virginia roots go all the way back to my grandmother. And so this year, once I left my own presidential campaign, I spent a lot of time helping others win. In fact, I was in 35 states in 4 months. No state, no Commonwealth was more important to me than the Commonwealth of Virginia, because this is where my family is. Mm-hmm. And every single office makes a difference, whether it's in Richmond or it's in Washington, D.C. And so I felt it was my duty, my obligation, my opportunity, in my own self-interest, to help as many Republican office holders as possible. I believe that our party has all of the right policy answers. I believe, fundamentally, most people agree with us, even if they don't know it yet. And so one of the things that I feel very strongly about is not just inspiring and galvanizing people who know they're Republicans to reach out to others who may not yet know they agree with us, but also to reach into communities who may say, no, I'm not a Republican. But if sometimes we take away the political rhetoric and just get down to some common sense things that people know about in their lives, people say, yeah, I agree with that. So, yes, I spent a great deal of time in the fall at all kinds of events, and I will continue to do so because this is my home. As I say, I ran for president because I believe in a citizen government of by and for the people. I ran for president because I think conservative policies work better. I ran for president because I think we are best off when we disperse power out of Washington, D.C., and return it where it belongs, to state houses, to businesses, to families, to communities. And I think most people actually agree with that. So who knows what the future will bring, but I will look forward to continuing to talk to the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia about things that we agree on, things that we may not yet know we agree on, but most people are pragmatic. Most people have a lot of common sense. I like to say all politics is personal, not local, as Tip O'Neill used to say, personal. People make personal choices based on what's going on in their personal lives. As you know, Virginia is becoming a purple state, and that doesn't mean we should give up on it. That means we should redouble our efforts, because the communities in this Commonwealth are served better by conservative policies. We just need them to understand how and why.
So, are you going to run for Senate in 2018 in Virginia?
Well, I don't know yet, John. So sorry, I'm not going to make a big announcement on your show. Look, I'm certainly looking at that opportunity. It's a little early to be making that decision. We're 2 weeks into a new administration. I will just say this. We should be realistic as Republicans. We should be realistic that this is going to be a very, very tough race. Virginia is a purple state. Virginia has 2 Democratic senators. The Democratic Party is going to throw everything they have at defending Tim Kaine's seat. And meanwhile, the Republican Party has a lot of seats of their own that they need to defend. So we ought to be very realistic. I'm not speaking as a candidate now. I'm speaking as a Republican, somebody who cares about the Commonwealth. This is going to be a very, very tough race.
No doubt. That's why, in order to have a viable candidate, it's going to need somebody like yourself that has been there, done that, who can take the heat and also have the ability to raise a lot of money both both locally and nationally. If I think you get in, I've got you as the overwhelming favorite to be the nominee, and normally I don't get this stuff wrong. Final question. I've got a couple more minutes. You were very critical in the campaign, President Trump's comments in his future dealings, now present dealings, with Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation. What advice would you give the president right now on that issue?
I find it hard to understand. I'll be very honest with you. I find it hard to understand President Trump's comments about Vladimir Putin. I found his comments with Bill O'Reilly the other night difficult to support. I think we know who Vladimir Putin is, and I think we know how he has governed in Russia. And there is no question that this is a bad hombre, as our president likes to say. I do understand that sometimes if you are negotiating, it's helpful to have a good cop and a bad cop. And perhaps President Trump is trying to appeal to Putin as the good cop, while his cabinet officials, his UN ambassador, just as an example, his Secretary of Defense, his Secretary of State, are playing the bad cop. What I would suggest to him is perhaps those roles ought better to be reversed, because Vladimir Putin represents, or I should say, respects strength. And I think he needs to understand that this nation, while it perhaps can do business with him with regard to terrorists, I'm doubtful about that right now, but I think President Trump is right to test that thesis. But I think Vladimir Putin is not swayed by flattery. I think what he's swayed by is strength.
So your advice to Trump would be not to appear as friendly towards Putin, but I mean, what Trump is saying is, look, there might be common ground to negotiate with the Russians as far as our common enemy ISIS, and why not have a positive relationship with him? He's saying, what's the matter with that? If you have your eyes open,
the matter with
why
that.
is that bad?
Oh, nothing's the matter with that. I mean, that's the point. The substance of what he's saying, the substance of what he's trying to negotiate, that is, let's have a constructive relationship with Russia on the subject of defeating ISIS. There's nothing wrong with that substance. However, I do think when a President Trump, in essence, defends Putin's actions, and his actions, Putin's actions are beyond the pale. He poisons his political enemies, let there be no doubt. He has his state, his military has participated in the slaughter of civilians. There is no doubt what his actions are. And I think there can be no doubt that our president and that our nation do not condone that kind of behavior.
All right, we are out of time. I want to thank former presidential candidate Carly Fiorina for being with us. For more information, you can go to carlyfiorina.com, carlyfiorina.com, and I have Carly Fiorina as the substantial favorite if she so chooses to run for the U.S. Senate in 2018. I have her as the favorite to be the nominee. Miss Fiorina, thanks for being with us.
Hey, John, and please, I told you before, call me Carly. It's Carly. Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. Have a great day.
All right. Carly Fiorina. More information, go to carlyfiorina.com. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. Keep it right here.